This forum is titled The Importance of Hydropower to Rural Communities. And I'd like to welcome everyone here, my colleagues and others that are here. The House Natural Resources Subcommittee on Water, Wildlife, and Fisheries Chair, Cliff Benz from Oregon, Congressman Holter from Idaho, and others I think will be joining us also. I'd like to thank the witnesses for taking time out of your busy schedules to join us and have this discussion about the importance of hydropower. I look forward to this discussion, and it's one of the most important issues that we're facing in our country right now. Energy is foundational. It is foundational to powering our homes, keeping us running and moving. Hydropower is especially critical for secure, affordable, and clean energy. Eastern Washington, we're leading the way in showing the rest of America what's possible when we unleash hydropower. The Columbia Snake River system serves as the beating heart of our region, and it helped transform our region from what was a dry, barren sagebrush to one of the most productive agriculture regions in the world. And as a result, farmers in the Pacific Northwest are able to send their products, wheat, apples, potatoes, all across America and to countries around the world. It strengthens our energy grid. It's lowered energy costs for families and businesses, transformed our entire region, all while helping reduce carbon emissions. Unfortunately, not everyone sees it that way. We have dam breaching advocates right now, like President Biden, Governor Inslee, and Senator Murray, who have advocated to tear out the lower Snake River dams. This would be devastating to our region. It would send energy costs through the roof. It would put our communities at risk of dangerous blackouts, and it would make it impossible for our farmers to feed the world. This is the wrong approach. I believe that hydropower is a model that we should be expanding. That is why last week I introduced the Hydropower Clean Energy Future Act to reform the outdated licensing process and promote the innovation needed to usher in the next generation of hydro technology. And why is this important? Only 3% of the dams in America produce electricity. By leveraging the untapped potential for more hydropower energy, we could double hydropower production in the United States without building a new dam. This legislation will help us get there by removing barriers and rapidly expanding hydropower development. The United States of America is blessed with abundant natural resources, and we've been the best stewards of them. It's critical that we foster these resources so that our families and our businesses have reliable, affordable, clean energy. It protects our way of life, it's foundational to human prosperity and flourishing. And again, I just want to say thank you, grateful to all the witnesses for being here today. I look forward to hearing from each one of you as to how we can secure our energy future. And with that, I think I'll, do you all have opening statements?
I do.
You do, okay. Do you have opening statements?
I'll be ready by the time the
Okay,
rest is done.
okay, well then I'll yield to the, I'll yield to the gentleman from Idaho, Mr. Holter.
Well, I'm going to echo a lot of what my good colleague from Washington State has said, but in my home state of Idaho, hydropower is absolutely huge. And I'm going to touch on these lower Snake River dams. It's a critical linchpin to North Idaho and for the Pacific Northwest. And removal of those or breaching those would be economic devastation. And so just a little bit of math. Those lower Snake River dams produce enough electricity to power about 800,000 homes. Now, just to compare that to solar panels, for example, it would take somewhere around 3 million solar panels occupying over 6,000 acres to replace that kind of capacity. Flood control. It's a major issue and something that those provide a resource for. During heavy rain or snow melt, dams safeguard our communities, ag lands, and infrastructure from damage on that front. Dams also ensure we have a reliable water supply. And I've said many times before that for Idahoans, water is our lifeline. Just a quick personal story. My family has lived in the same general area near Boise, Idaho, for over 100 years. And we came across some old family photos here last 3-4 months. And I recognized some of the landmarks, but there was no ag whatsoever. It was just purely barren. It was grazing only. And my mother's 94, still living. I said, why did you? This is how stupid I was. I said, how come there's no ag lands? Well, we didn't have any water. Because that network had not been put in place at the time of those old photos. So that's just a personal story I find. Transportation facilitated by our dams, Lewiston Port that we have access to, the recreation, the tourism. The long story short in all this is that they were put there for a reason, and they were wisely put there for a reason as well. And I also know that we have a lot of friends who are making the argument that somehow removal of these is going to solve the issue with fish flow. And the science just simply doesn't back that. And there are parallel systems without any dams. They're seeing the same issues with fish, whether it be weather patterns, wildfire, where silt flows after a wildfire into the water and covers the smoking beds and those types of things. Predator problems. Point is that that's just something that is, I know it's very near and dear to the minds and hearts of my colleagues here. It certainly is for me and for my constituents. And the benefits of hydro, it's clean. Some of my friends on the other side of the aisle, Natural Resource Committee, they don't want to see development of fossil fuels. They don't want to see development of coal or nuclear, and I would argue even with solar and wind, they don't support that fully because they don't want to do the mining process to create the minerals necessary to have wind and solar. So hydro is it's clean, it's efficient, and a huge benefit to the Pacific Northwest. So with that, Madam Chair, you're back.
Excellent, thank you. The gentleman from Oregon, Mr. Benz.
Perfect timing. Just a couple of things. It seems to me that the primary arguments that we need to be making are, we all agree that there's thank you, that there's a need for more hydro. In fact, I met with Amazon just a couple of weeks ago, and they were saying that they would love to expand on the Oregon side their $15 billion footprint, but they need more power. And so I asked them if they were going to show up at the hearing on Monday, and so indicate they seemed reluctant. But the point is, we need more power, not less. And so the question when it comes to public opinion, which the White House is trying to pervert through its CEQ efforts, is how do we go in and show that the amount of benefit from removing the dams, just as Congressman Holter indicated, would be extraordinarily modest. The number I understand that our witness is going to testify to on Monday is 0.01% would be the benefit to the fish. The damage to the community would be amazingly awful. The fact that we already did, as you guys all know this, the environmental impact statement and analysis years ago should be enough. I've learned in the last couple of days that the primary focus, I think, of CEQ and others is Judge Simon's lawsuit. There has been explained to me that people think Congress does not have the authority over dam removal, and that it will happen by virtue of what Judge Simon is doing. I think we need to be terrifically cognizant of that, and make sure that our hearing on Monday illustrates that it is Congress that has that authority, and that should the court try to step in, that will be met with whatever the appropriate response should be from this level. But I'm looking forward to hearing your thoughts, and so with that, Madam Chair, I'll yield back.
Thank you very much. Well, let's hear from those that are going to be testifying, and we'll just start at this end and have you introduce yourselves when you offer your testimony. But Mr. Scott Sims, the CEO of Public Power Council.
Well, thank you so much. Good afternoon, Chairman McMorris Rogers, and of course the members of the caucus here today. We really are appreciative of the time you've made for this important session, and thank you for your really thoughtful opening comments. I serve as the CEO and Executive Director of the Public Power Council. I'm also a fourth-generation Washingtonian. PPC represents the interests of more than 100 consumer-owned electric utilities in the states of Washington, Oregon, Idaho, Montana, and a little sliver of Wyoming and a little bit of Nevada. And these large and small utilities are both in the rural and urban areas, but one thing that really ties them together in the Great Pacific Northwest is the reliance on the Bonneville Power Administration, which is the very largest of the 4 PMAs, or power marketing agencies, under the U.S. Department of Energy. These consumers, the utilities pay an astonishing amount. It's $3.9 billion to run Bonneville Power Administration, and these utilities pay 70% of those costs. So basically, all of these consumer-owned utilities have a vested interest in Bonneville's success, in making sure that it runs a very prudent business, and to make sure that they're upholding the values and the responsibilities of both the agency and their community values of these utilities. So imagine this, BPA markets the power of 31 hydroelectric dams and 1 nuclear power plant located on the Hanford Reservation in eastern Washington. That's an astonishing amount of horsepower, an astonishing amount of energy that's clean for the communities that we serve in the Pacific Northwest. In addition, it's about 15,000 miles of high voltage transmission lines stretching across all of those states, which represents about 75% of the total transmission in the Northwest. Again, a very large footprint. So we've talked about it a little bit today, but a critical component of BPA's predominant, this mic seems to be cutting out here a little bit, a critical component of the predominant hydropower fleet is the role that the Snake River dams, which were completed in the 1970s, play in this system. They basically produce about 1,000 average megawatts, but they have an ability to peak far beyond that. And as you know, they're critical for the integration of wind, solar, and other renewables. But more importantly, in addition, they're serving the communities 24/7 in all of our Northwest society, and they're coming to the rescue in more crises than we care to imagine these days, given weather anomalies and other issues that are stretching the system. So let's talk about this a little bit, because I wanted to dig into one example that I think you'll find pretty interesting. We believe, similar to what you've been saying, that despite this invaluable role, there are some special interests, single interests, that are really trying to tear apart the fabric that we have for an energy system, and they're really trying to ultimately breach those lower Snake River dams. We think that those would be really rash decisions for these hydro projects, and it would pose really devastating consequences. The lower Snake River dams regularly are the defining line between keeping the power flowing and parts of the West being plunged into rolling blackouts. So this is the case in point I want to talk about. Last Labor Day, not even a year ago, the entire West was gripped in a heat wave, and the Northwest was exporting electricity to California and the desert Southwest. If the lower Snake River dams were taken out of the mix, that part of the West would have gone into rolling blackouts, and things would have been more critical for us in the Northwest. Now, we were not as critically hot at that time last year. Luckily, our estimates are that if we were 10 degrees higher in ambient temperature in the Northwest, we would not have been able to export the volume we did to California and the Southwest, and we would have for sure gone into blackouts. And so this is how close we're getting every year. Surely, we're in a place where every year we're watching those heat extremes and those cold extremes, and we're crossing our fingers and hopeful with the system we have today. So imagine if we add fleet electrification, coal plant retirements, natural gas plant retirements, the removal of natural gas from our homes and other businesses. More and more, our reliance on electricity is becoming a more pointed resource that we have to be very careful to safeguard. So the Biden administration has recently released 2 documents regarding the lower Snake River dams, and they both stand in kind of contrast to each other, frankly. In July 2022, an analysis was prepared by the Bonneville Power Administration via a consulting contract, and they estimated that if we were to remove the lower Snake River dams, we would talk about tens of billions of dollars in funding to replace those resources, and an expected 65% rate increase to power customers in the Northwest. The report concluded that there was no possible way to remove the lower Snake River dams without jeopardizing grid reliability. The second report was conducted by the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, or NOAA, and it called for at least a partial removal of the lower Snake River dams. This report was prepared in conjunction with plaintiffs that seek removal of the lower Snake River dams, was anonymously produced, was not peer-reviewed and had glaring biological errors, which we at PPC pointed out last summer and NOAA still has not acknowledged. In fact, just like the last week, we at PPC sent a letter to NOAA expressing our frustration with the agency for pandering to the increasing political pressure from single-issue advocates demanding the removal of lower Stickley dams. Clearly, the issue is very complicated, but we at PPC remain vigilant, and we're very thankful for the efforts of you all in safeguarding the system. So thank you sincerely for your leadership and for hosting this forum today, and we greatly appreciate the caucus's focus on the critical set of issues, and I gladly answer your questions, and I hope that your mic has more success than mine.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Excellent. And Representative Doug LaMalfa from California has joined us. Great to have you here. Did you want to say anything?
I'll hold it.
You'll hold. Okay, very good. Let's hear from Jim Haren, Executive Director of Midwest Electric Consumers Association. Thank you.
It's a mouthful. Thank you, Chairman McMorris-Rogers. Appreciate the invitation to be here. Definitely hope this mic works better than Scott's. I had the good fortune early in my career of volunteering on Representative Bentz's House campaigns when he was in the legislature. Worked for one of the co-ops in his footprint. Midwest essentially picks up where Scott's footprint ends. So I've got 313 consumer-owned utilities, cooperatives and municipals from western Montana all the way, or eastern Montana all the way to western Minnesota, south to Kansas and Nebraska. Over 1 million consumer-owned utilities, predominantly rural communities. Our connection point is that we all have an investment in the Western Area Power Administration and the Corps of Engineers and the Bureau of Reclamation. For over 65 years, these 313 utilities have invested in this system, have paid for the transmission, the generation, the operation of this system. And the benefit we see from that, as Scott's noted, is actually increasing. I think we all looked at the system 65 years ago as a baseload resource. It still remains a baseload resource, the best baseload resource that we have. But as we see thermal baseload resources retire, coal and natural gas in our footprint, hydropower is being asked to do more. Much like Scott's example of the Labor Day event and the heat wave, we had the flip. We had Winter Storm Uri in our footprint in 2021, and hydropower came to the rescue. An additional 5,000 megawatts from the Corps of Engineers through WAPA, it really helped save that system. We also see increasing benefits even in growth areas with the ancillary benefits of hydropower, black start capabilities, reactive power, that reliability and resiliency of the grid. And when I talk to large utilities in my system who own baseload, who own thermal baseload, that value of hydropower isn't going away. In fact, again, increasing over time as we see more asked of the system. The other benefit that we get from the hydropower system, or the other benefit that we get as consumer-owned utilities, is a transmission system that's really second to none. And again, we've paid for this. Consumer-owned utilities, many of them in persistent poverty areas, have paid for this over 65 years. And as power customers, the other thing that we do in addition to paying for hydropower and paying for hydropower generation and transmission is we pay the lion's share of joint cost or dam safety cost in this system, and we pay for irrigation, aid irrigation supply, and so we support our agricultural communities in that way. So I'll keep my comments short, hope for some questions on it. Very much appreciate the opportunity to present and to engage on this topic, and again, appreciate the caucus's support of hydropower to rural communities in the West.
Great, very good. Thank you. We're pleased Congressman Jim Baird from Indiana has been able to join us. That's great.
Thank you.
Okay, next up, Ryan Holter, Senior Policy and Analysis of Grant County PUD.
That's right. Thank you, Chairman McMorris-Rogers, members of the caucus. Appreciate the opportunity to be here. I think my comments this afternoon are going to be focused on really what I see as a case study to show the importance of hydropower to rural communities that exemplifies that need more than maybe any place in the nation. So Grant PUD, it's a non-profit public utility that provides electrical power and wholesale fiber services to our residents of the county. Grant County, it's very rural, predominantly agricultural region located in central Washington state. It covers a total surface area of a little more than 2,700 square miles, which is equal to or greater than the size of Delaware. And it's home to approximately 100,000 people. As a public utility, we're governed by a democratically elected 5-member board of commissioners made up of local citizens who are also elected on a nonpartisan basis by the people of Grant County. Our commissioners, their job is they set policy, review operations, and approve budget expenditures. Grant PUD's renewable energy portfolio is rooted in hydropower, which has allowed us to reliably and affordably serve the homes, businesses, and farms of Grant County for many decades. Today, thanks to the vision and efforts of the pioneers of our county and also those pioneers of our local utility, Grant PUD is the owner and operator of 2 hydroelectric dams located on the Columbia River, Priest Rapids Dam and Wanapum Dam. In total, these resources have a combined generating capacity of more than 2,100 megawatts of clean, renewable energy. Collectively known as the Priest Rapids Project, these dams are licensed by the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission. In Priest Rapids Dam, it began generating power in 1959, and Wanapum Dam shortly after in 1963. These locally owned and operated hydroelectric resources have been the main engines powering Grant County's economy for 6 decades, as they have enabled Grant PUD to provide our customers with some of the lowest cost and most reliable electricity in the entire country. While most of our county is agricultural, some of our largest power purchasers are high-tech data centers and a mixture of manufacturing companies, including many manufacturers that are developing technologies that will support the renewable energy industry. Since the mid-2000s, an interesting thing in Grant County and our utility is that it's been one of the fastest growing utilities in the Northwest. And there's a correlation of recent data that shows a positive correlation between this load growth and the per capita income of the county's residents. From 2005 through 2021, our utility has experienced annual load growth of around 3%. During the same time frame, per capita income grew approximately 4.5% for residents throughout the county. To ensure these hydropower resources continue to serve our region and customers for years to come, Grant PUD has invested millions of dollars in our generating facilities. Investments include efforts to modernize the turbining generators at both facilities to further maximize the potential energy flowing through the Columbia River by generating more energy with the same amount of water flow. In addition to ensuring the continued operational efficiency of our dams, we also take environmental stewardship very seriously. Our federal license to operate the dams requires us to provide safe fish passage and invest heavily in fish rearing and studies to ensure the survival of migratory and otherwise endangered species. Since 2006, Grant PUD has invested more than $47 million in these fish supporting efforts while also contributing nearly $24 million in habitat preservation and restoration projects. I appreciate the opportunity to highlight this positive impact hydropower has had on Grant County and also our region. Hydropower has long bolstered the Washington state power system. It's clean, dependable, flexible. It's the bedrock of the state's clean energy strategy. Without the Priest Rapids project, Grant County would not be the county it is today, nor would it be the county that it will be in the future. Local decision-making and control of these resources has helped the county grow and prosper, and our low-cost power has attracted new businesses and created more jobs that help drive our regional and state economies. Really appreciate all of your support, and happy to highlight a case study of just one of many throughout the country that shows the importance of hydropower to rural communities like ours.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Mr. Chandler Gould, CEO of National Association of Wheat Growers.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Chairwoman McMorris Rogers and members of the Western Caucus, and I appreciate the opportunity to participate in today's forum and to give you a wheat grower's perspective on the importance of the Lower Snake River Dam. My name is Chandler Gould. I am the CEO of the National Association of Wheat Growers, a federation of 20 state wheat growers association representing wheat producers' needs and interests in Washington, D.C. Our members feel it is essential to participate in this forum and reiterate the importance of the Columbia Snake River system and the Lower Snake River dams for low-carbon energy and agriculture exports. The Lower Snake River dams are a critical infrastructure system required to move U.S.-grown wheat to high-value markets around the world. To be more specific, more than 55% of all U.S. wheat exports move through the Snake River system by barge or rail. Specifically, 10% of the wheat that is exported from the United States passes through the 4 locks and dams along the lower Snake River. This corridor is the 3rd largest grain export corridor in the world and is the single largest corridor for U.S. wheat exports. NOG strongly supports and recognizes the sustainability and reliability of wheat transportation by barge. The Columbia Snake River system is an essential part of a logistical web that moves over half of all of U.S. wheat exports to more than 20 Pacific Rim countries and encompasses some of the largest U.S. wheat buyers in the world. Over the last several decades, our industry has worked hard to build relationships with customers worldwide to feed their consumers who have come to rely on the U.S. farmers to provide a stable and affordable food supply. And the reason that we are a reliable trading partner is because we have a world-class infrastructure thoroughway through our inland waterways that allows us to safely and efficiently get products shipped around the world. Any disruption to that system would significantly hurt our ability to consistently provide low-cost, high-value food products compared to our foreign competitors. Much of the discussion related to the federal Columbia River power system includes potential changes to the Columbia Snake River system, including altering flow regimes and even removing certain dams and locks. Such drastic actions, however, would have a detrimental impact on the agriculture. Wheat farmers move grain most efficiently and save millions of dollars a year by using waterways instead of rail or truck while reducing greenhouse gas emissions. Barging is by far the most fuel-efficient way to transport compared to railroads and trucking. As an example, a 4-barge tow moving wheat carries the equivalent of 1.5 100-unit trains or 538 semis. Removing the dams would not only remove clean hydroelectricity, but would mandate significantly higher carbon emissions as grain handlers are forced to rely on railroads and semi-trucks for long-haul deliveries to export facilities in Portland and elsewhere. There is insufficient alternative transportation infrastructure to replace barge shipments for wheat in the Pacific Northwest to export markets. The increased traffic on rail lines would require creating new routes, laying down new tracks that would require a very lengthy permitting process for construction to proceed, with no guarantee that it would be comparable in rates or service. Also, the increased truck traffic would severely impact the durability and the quality of our roads, creating a need for new repairs, new roads, or both, most likely increasing concerns about road safety. Wheat producers would bear a significant cost if the systems of locks and dams along the Snake River is removed by an act of Congress or halted due to various administrative procedures. The long-term economic impact of breaching the dams would be devastating. The potential financial hit would be due to the loss of the value of the wheat currently being exported out of the PNW, the loss of the value of the wheat for growers in other parts of the United States, the loss of jobs and economic activity, and the loss of regional farmland values. In addition to the direct impact on wheat growers, further analysis is needed to evaluate the broad implications that dam breaching would have on the agriculture sector and the economy, such as existing physical assets, namely the 197 inland grain elevators, 28 river terminals, and 8 terminal export facilities are located along the river system, which would lose significant value by breaching the dams. NOG supports the Columbia Snake River system and will continue to emphasize its importance in serving wheat buyers worldwide. Breaching the dams of the lower Snake River would have a devastating economic impact on wheat production and our market competitiveness, not just in the Pacific Northwest, but nationally. Thank you for the opportunity to participate in today's forum, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you. Mr. Brian Edwards, Executive Vice President of the Grand River Dam Authority, please.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. Can you all hear me all right?
Yes.
Perfect. So, thank you again for inviting me to come speak with you. I echo many of the comments on the value of hydropower and what it does for rural America as my colleagues. GRDA is an operator of 3 multi-use hydro facilities in northeast Oklahoma. Pensacola project, which many of your members came to visit several years ago, is the crown jewel. And it's an ideal example of a multi-use project that the Federal Power Authority envisioned over 100 years ago. It's been operating for over 80 years. We welcome over 1 million visitors each year, including anglers from around the world, and it produces enough energy to power 42,000 homes. But more importantly, it's an economic driver for the 4-state region. We're right up in the state of Oklahoma, adjoining Kansas, Missouri, and Arkansas. We have an ongoing water quality management program. We have a water lab out of our systems building in the small town of Langley. It's got a little over 600 people in it. We have a state-of-the-art lab there where we monitor the water quality for the project. We're kind of in a unique position, and right now we're in the middle of a FERC relicensing effort that we began in 2017. And we just now filed our final license application at the end of May, and we're now going to begin a multi-year NEPA evaluation process. So just last week, in your committee, you urged the FERC commissioners to improve hydro relicensing, and we echo that. So I've got 2 examples of issues that FERC has the ability to address today that don't require the need for any additional legislation. First, projects like ours that have been in existence for decades have already been relicensed using model environmental statutes. They should not be subject to the same level of public scrutiny as a proposed new project. These projects have been here for decades, their impacts are well understood, and FERC should develop a more efficient relicensing process for these types of projects. Second, FERC must do a better job of identifying and maintaining the proper scope of its work in relicensing, properly manage the time and costs and expectations of all the parties involved. For example, in our project, Pensacola relicensing is turned into a referendum on flood control responsibilities of the Corps of Engineers. And there's no less than 11 statutes enacted by Congress between 1936 and 2019 that repeatedly reaffirm that the Corps has jurisdiction for flood control in the Arkansas River Basin, which includes our lake. Yet, FERC staff, at the request of certain relicensing participants, has required GRDA to conduct multi-million dollar studies to understand flood control at the Pensacola Dam, despite the fact that it's not within FERC's purview to regulate the Corps of Engineers or flood control. While these have demonstrated that our operations don't have any impact on flooding or cause or worsen it, whether they were unnecessary, it's still been a burden to all of our ratepayers, many of them rural electric customers and rural community customers. Another example, the FERC staff continues to entertain an issue with the Tar Creek Superfund site. It's an EPA Superfund site, and the EPA is regulating it. GRDA is not a responsible party to that, but yet they're still yet to make a determination on whether or not we have to study contaminated sediment transport through the system, even though we are not a cause of that contamination, and it is well outside of the project boundary and just part of our watershed. And nobody's ever said, no, you don't have to do that, so it just continues. So based on the experience, and the relicensing process could be more affordable if FERC were to improve its practices by doing 2 things. First, be more vigilant at maintaining the relicensing scope. I think that's so important to manage everybody's expectations. This is what we can control, this is what we can't control. And then it also matches to the congressional authority of the other agencies, the EPA for one. And then second, develop the process that accounts for long-standing and the continued presence of existing facilities. I mean, the lake has created its own ecosystem. It's been there for over 80 years. But we're going through the same process that anybody that wanted to develop a new hydro project or a new dam would go through. You know, adopting on these improvements would focus on issues that are germane to FERC and the Federal Power Act, and it also would delegate clear lines of authorities to the appropriate federal agencies that have the other responsibilities. And I don't think this stuff can come too soon. You know, there's 300 hydropower licenses that are going to expire.
Yes.
You know, within the next 10 years. You know, and we're just over 100 watts. This is just over a 100 megawatt facility, nameplate capacity, right? And, you know, we've spent millions and millions of dollars and still have millions ahead of us to finish this. But, you know, anything to streamline the efforts of the people that come behind this, I think would benefit the industry as a whole, and more importantly, would benefit our country to keep the clean energy coming. That's my comments. I'd be happy to take any
Great.
questions.
Thank you. Appreciate all of you being here. And for the first time in 40 years, we actually got some reforms to NEPA in the Fiscal Responsibility Act that recently passed and was signed into law. And that was a first step, but there's a lot more that needs to be done around permitting and the regulatory process in place. And yes, FERC needs to get focused on its mission. EPA, we have a lot of work to provide oversight to them. They have 151 proposed rulemakings at OMB. It's a lot of rules. It's gonna keep us a lot of oversight hearings. Whew. Yeah, there's a lot of work that needs to be done, but what you do is so important. We often talk about energy security being national security. I'm also seeing there's more conversations about energy and food security and the intersection of them, and that food security is absolutely national security, and it's been underscored with the war in Ukraine and what we're seeing as a fallout there. I wanted to ask Mr. Gould if you would just speak to how the river systems support global food supply, and do you believe that national security would be compromised if we lost the navigation assets on the lower Snake River?
You're absolutely right, Chairwoman. I mean, the ability to be food secure is a national security issue, and those of us in agriculture have been saying that for 20 years, but it's really just kind of become more apparent in the last 10, and then definitely with the invasion of Russia into Ukraine that disrupted world supplies of wheat being shipped around. If we did not have the lower Snake River just itself, we would have lost up to 55% of the wheat going out that direction. And so being able to supply, and not necessarily the high value markets that we were talking about, but countries like Sudan and the Middle East that were very dependent on those Black Sea exports that were blocked. The only way that they were going to have enough food to keep their governments and feed their people was through U.S. wheat being to get out of our heartland and get out to the coast. And the river systems, including the Snake River, are a vital key to that component.
Thank you. Tremendous infrastructure, so important for both energy and food supply. Mr. Sims, I wanted to ask you about the Columbia River Treaty, which is certainly top of mind right now. And right now, the United States sends a large entitlement to Canada in the form of free hydropower generated on the Columbia River system. And what it means is that the ratepayers in the Northwest shoulder that burden. And there's been bipartisan, bicameral calls to renegotiate a balanced treaty. I wanted you to speak today just about the 4 lower Snake River dams and the potential of removing the 3,000 megawatt capacity of these dams, if you think that's having any impact on the Columbia River Treaty negotiations.
Well, that's an excellent question. I borrowed a microphone, so you can hear me.
Okay, good.
Absolutely. So as the chairman of the Columbia River Treaty Power Group, we are very concerned about the inequity imbalance that currently favors Canada to the tune of about $300 million annually in the entitlement benefit. So you're absolutely right. If you take the lower Snake River dams out of the equation, now you have an obligation to Canada that is even deeper for the United States. So imagine every month the United States has to send electricity to Canada as a balancing mechanism of 50% sharing under the treaty agreement. If we remove the lower Snake River dams, we've just taken more resource out of the bottom of the picture, and they still have the obligation on the table. So what we have to do is we have to rebalance this treaty, and we have to keep the lower Snake River dams, and we have to work together to make sure that can happen.
Very good. Excellent comments, everyone. I think I'll go to Mr. Fulcher next, and I think I'm sneaking out. So are you prepared to?
I'm happy.
Okay, very good.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I've got a couple questions as well. And Mr. Sims, you're probably the best person, but anybody who has an insight on this is welcome to share. But in the management of power and the distribution of baseload sources versus peaking sources is always an issue. And in terms of hydro, generally speaking, is that considered a baseload source or is it project specific?
Yeah, generally speaking, great question. Generally speaking, Congressman, in the Pacific Northwest, most of the hydro resources are a baseload resource. They are essentially one of the best resources for responding very quickly to changes in need or production. In fact, it's one of the reasons why they're one of the best for integrating renewables, because as renewables are so variable, solar and wind, hydro can scale up or scale back, depending on the needs out there. And frankly, with the proliferation of renewables that we're seeing, hydro is becoming even more critically important in that space. An example, Congressman from California may appreciate that in the evenings now in California, when the sun goes down, there's such a massive amount of solar panels that when the sun goes down, so does the energy production. But the ambient air temperature, the cement, the concrete, it's still incredibly hot. Where do they get that power to run those air conditioners into the night when the sun's gone down? They import it from the Pacific Northwest.
So just to paraphrase back, there's always some degree of fluctuation in runoff levels, water levels and whatnot. But I'm hearing, generally speaking, at least in the Pacific Northwest, that's considered a baseload source.
Absolutely. Generally, the Pacific Northwest, even when we have a bad water year, we're still producing a tremendous amount of hydropower. And what we try to do is work those reservoirs the best we can around the fish obligations to make sure that we're complying appropriately for all of the required fish operations of these dams, and yet we still can produce power. In fact, they have an unusual capability of being able to ramp and peak for certain periods way beyond what they normally do. So for instance, I used the Snake River dams earlier, about 1,000 average megawatts for their output, which is about the size of a city of Seattle that they can power. But when they need to, they can ramp up for a short period of about 10 hours a day for 5 days and power 3 Seattles. So that's an example of when you have a power crisis and you have a situation in which other plants are not showing up, or wind or solar is not showing up, hydro steps in. Thank you, sir.
Thank you for that. Mr. Holter, you had talked about some of the projects that you had worked on that required modernization in the hydro world. Can you describe what is a common modernization you have? What does that entail?
Sure, yeah, great question. So at Grand PD, we have our 2 dams that we operate on the Columbia River, and some of the recent modernization that we've had to go through is with our turbining generators. So you can appreciate that these dams were both built about 60 years ago, one even a little bit longer than that. Equipment wears out, and so as we've been looking at how to increase or maintain the efficiency of these, we've had the opportunity to go through and upgrade both of those throughout both dams. So at Wanapum Dam, that project is complete, but these are long-term projects. There's 10 turbines and generators in each dam, and both take 7 to 9 years in order to complete. So when we talk about modernizing, we're talking multiple year long project on this. So Wanapum Dam is complete, and we're about halfway through Priest Rapids Dam. The benefit of doing that is that the efficiency we can get from modern technology is that we can utilize the same amount of water flowing down the Columbia River and generate more electricity, up to about 3% more with each turbine generator that has been replaced.
Thank you for that. I've got one more quick, and I'll turn it over to my colleagues here. But Mr. Edwards, I missed one of the things you said. You said there were 2 things in terms of for relicensing or improvements they could make, or changes that need to happen within FERC, something like that. The first one was managing the relicensing scope, and I didn't catch the second one. Can you?
Having a different set of license requirements for existing projects. There's several projects in the United States that have already been through the NEPA process, but when you relicense, you
Okay.
start over, and that's the second aspect of it.
All right, thank you, that makes sense, thank you. To my colleagues, Mr. Benz, any questions for the panel, or?
I'll go last.
Okay, Mr. Lamolf? Questions for the panel?
Thank you, Mr. Fulcher and colleagues, great to be with you. Thank you for this panel, appreciate it. A question more specifically to the area on the barging. I know that's not a hydro question, I just want to get this out of the way. Is this hotted up? All right, green. Afternoon Goldens here anyway. So, on the barging, it's not a hydro question specifically. One of you on the panel, might have Mr. Sims when I walked in, was saying that NOAA is looking at like a partial decommissioning or maybe some of the dams or some of the infrastructure. What does that do to the barging, let alone the hydro side?
Yeah, thank you for clarifying. Sir, what I was really referring to was NOAA is producing a report where they're exploring lower Stigler Dam breaching. That's something that actually had not been done in NOAA's past. So that was an unusual circumstance, but it would be essentially recommending breaching, which would be essentially an unnavigable river. And I'll yield to my colleague for additional information there on the navigation impacts, but essentially you'd be talking about fully breaching those 4 lower Stigler dams, which would make them a non-power producing entity and a non-navigable section of the river.
Currently, that portion, I don't know the area so
That's
well,
fine.
is currently navigable.
It's currently very navigable thanks to the lock system, as well as, and many people gloss over this, but very productive fish ladders for bringing the adults upstream, and very productive juvenile passes for bringing juveniles safely out to the ocean.
Okay, all right, so we're losing, as was said, I'm just clarifying for myself, that we're losing a lot of ability for mobilizing for wheat and other products, and all the hydro that we're losing at the same time.
And they're also very symbiotic, I must add. So you think about navigation, recreation, hydro production, irrigation, drinking water, all of those aspects are very interrelated and very much symbiotic in the hydro system.
Picking up off what Mr. Fulcher was saying, is, given the craziness of California's power grid, for example, with when the sun goes down, the power goes off, is the system up there flexible enough to be basically the peaker plant? And anybody on the panel wants to weigh in, of course. Is it flexible enough to be on and off, or is everything running pretty much 24/7 at close to capacity, making hydro?
So it's getting tighter and tighter all the time for us in the Pacific Northwest and across the West in general. And when we have surpluses, last year was a tremendous year for water retention in our system. We were able to produce what we needed in the Northwest and to export to California and the desert Southwest, but we're not always so lucky. And we are seeing more and more of an increase in need up in our region in the Northwest, and more gas plant retirement and coal plant retirement, which is putting more and more reliance on the hydro resource. So basically, Californians rely on us sometimes, and the window is closing more, and we're all needing more electricity. So it's not a great situation.
Well, certainly, as you see with this hastening to electrify more things, vehicles, and getting rid of gas appliances and such, the walls are closing from at least 2 sides on that, and it's really quite scary. So,
Yes, sir, when you have an increasing demand and decreasing supply, usually that's a great capitalist place to be, but not in the system where it takes an incredible amount of expense, time, and effort to build new resources. So that's what we're
And you said when you decrease the supply and increase demand, prices you can expect to go up 65% for wherever you procure electricity.
The study from Bonneville Power Administration conducted showed that if the lower Stigler dams were removed and we added billions of dollars of replacement resources, we would see a 65% increase in rates.
Where do you see the replacement coming from? Anybody weigh in if you wish, but
I could leave it to my colleagues as well, but small modular reactors would be one baseload resource option, given the clean energy requirements of Washington State.
nuclear reactors.
Nuclear, that's correct.
Yeah, we're years away from getting those approved.
Exactly. Yeah, so we're talking about a lot of ideas that folks have for replacing the energy resources, but no actual concrete.
Do you have any tips on helping me and Mr. Benz fight to keep our little dams out on the Klamath there? because, you know, they're imminent on this thing, and I still haven't given up, because it's gonna be devastating to that community there for the amount of economic activity and input that has, as well as electricity supply, as well as the stored water for firefighting capabilities and the property values. One lady contacted us that they've been warned that her home's gonna slide off the hill because of the change of, she says diatomaceous earth underneath is gonna change the dynamics there. Any tips on helping me and Cliff fight on for our 4 dams down there in the climate that are, you know, still important?
I would say retain the authority in Congress. We've heard some thoughts of folks wanting to migrate the authority for dams to some other party. Retain that authority for all jurisdictional aspects of the dams with Congress would be one step. And keep channeling the minority voices, but the ones who are actually keeping the lights on into sessions like this. And I'll defer to my colleagues since I feel like I'm taking too much of my time.
I'll have to stop soon as my chairman, Mr. Newhouse, is arriving. Go ahead.
I think just the other thing I would add is that economic impact that hydropower can have. I know in our region, it's been substantial to make the county what it is and to help the county to be able to continue to grow in the future. So that's been a very valuable talking point within our local region.
And they don't seem to give a damn about the economics for anybody, the replacement of it. We're gonna get to a point in 5, 7, 8 years, and we're gonna be short, and think, oops, what do we do? And boom, into the cage with you, you know, eat those worms. Thank you, I'll yield to Mr. Vanessa.
Mr. Baird, good friend from Indiana, any questions?
Yes. Well, I appreciate you being here, and I have, I have great respect for the efficacy of hydropower. Where we can get it, I think that's fabulous. But I'm going to change over to demonstrate, I think, my story kind of illustrates the kind of things you have to deal with. We have a couple of towns in the middle part of my district, Monticello, Indiana, and there's 2 lakes made as a result of the hydropower dams that were built in the 20s. So most of that land has been turned over to a community and let them invest in houses, and they got things that are on the lake, like a riverboat and so on and so on. But nonetheless, they found the 5 mussels that were on the endangered species list that was in the 12-mile of river that connected to a major river. So I walked that river. I wanted to see those mussels and so on, and they had a hard time finding some, but nonetheless, they needed to keep about 12 inches of water, according to a biological statement from the Fish and Wildlife folks. In doing that, because of a drought year, they ended up draining one of the lakes and started draining the other, and there was not really any effort made, in my opinion, to mitigate that. And in my looking at the situation, I found out that those mussels, when they have live larvae, they need to move those, and so they'll find a specific species of fish, and they'll grab a hold of them, and then they'll put that in their gills, and that's how those mussels move around the rivers and so on, through those fish. But my frustration was dealing with that situation and the property values and how much they declined, and the seawalls were destroyed in many situations. And so I just appreciate the things you have to deal with, because, as you mentioned, FERC was involved in that, the U.S. Fish and Wildlife was involved in that, and then the power company was involved in that. Tried to get them all together to resolve that, and didn't make any progress. So I hope you'll allow me to use this platform to kind of express 2 things. One, my frustration with that, and the regulations, the amount of regulations you have to deal with, and we need to make progress, like in FERC and permitting and all that. So, but if anyone has any comment, if you got any mussels in your dams, I'd like to know about it. comments that you want to make, you're welcome to do it.
And for some of us, Congressman Bear, the only muscles we got between our ears. So, in addition, Congressman Bentz, you requested to go last.
Yeah, just a quick question. If indeed the benefit to the fish is 0.01%, if we take out these dams, then does that mean any other dam below those four, which as I understand it have much more of an impact, should immediately be on the chopping block? And I put that rhetorically. I guess I'm anxious about our hearing that we're going to be having on Monday. And what I'm most anxious about, I want to go back to it again, is this concept that a judge is going to tell us how to do this and not Congress. And to that end, I think the way it was explained to me about 3 hours ago, going back to a question that was asked earlier, one of the solutions is keep the two lower dams, but then engage in deep drawdowns of the upper two dams. Which I took to mean that during certain periods of the year, you would have almost a free-flowing river, and then other times, perhaps you would raise the water table enough to float boats. That's of interest to me, but what's really of interest to me is who's in charge. And so, since I have to leave like a minute ago, if we can just go down the list and just say who should be in charge in your opinion, and if you have legal opinions that suggest that it should be Congress, I would like to see them, but have at it.
Well, I'll start for sure. Thank you for the question. Absolutely, historically, the decision power and the authority rests with Congress, and it has been proven, multiply cited. It is the place where the Corps of Engineers appeals for any changes to its authorizations, as does the Bureau of Reclamation. So I believe firmly, and I think the record shows, that the authority over these dams rests with Congress. Thank you.
So Congressman Bentz, thankfully we don't have anyone talking about removing main stem Missouri River dams at this point, but should that discussion ever come up, or general operations or large questions, I would put that in Congress as well. It's the closest to the people and closest to able to balance those interests across the basin.
Yeah, I would concur with what's been said, that it should be with Congress.
I have to agree, but also our current president of the National Association of Wheat Growers is from the Klamath Basin, and we talk about your dams and his lack of water issues all the time, and so keeping that authority with Congress would protect your dams and the lower Snake River dams and give us more opportunity to make sure all sites are heard.
I concur. We were established through a loan from Congress. They actually stopped FDR's train when it came through Veneta on a campaign stop to get the authorization to build the Pensacola Dam. By the way, it took 2 years to build it, and we're 6 years into, almost 7 years into the relicensing process.
Thank you very much. That's great.
So the chairman for the Western Caucus, Mr. Newhouse, has joined us. I just got one closing comment and turn it over to the chairman. But we had an energy and commerce hearing earlier this year, and a mutual friend of Congresswoman Morris Rogers and I was there. He was testifying. It was Ed Schweitzer, the chairman of Schweitzer Engineering Labs. And the discussion at the time was about battery and battery technology. He made a comment that shifted the entire, at least for me, shifted the entire dialogue of the hearing when he said the greatest battery is water behind the dam. And I mean, that's probably nothing new. That's probably something that you're aware of, but I never thought of it that way. That is contained, manageable energy on a massive, massive level that we have that no other resource can match and be stored that way. And that was a meaningful exchange for me. And I want to just thank you all for your role, your testimony today, for educating us. And just please know that I think at least for the caucus and the panel here today, we're on the same page. We'll need your resources as we try to go about promoting a good, clean, efficient, reliable, renewable baseload source, which is hydro. So thank you for that, and I'll turn it over to good chairman, Mr. Newhouse.
Well, thank you, Russ. And I want to, got to say thanks to a lot of people. It's appropriation season, as you know, and so we've been busy all day, and we'll be tomorrow and probably the next couple of weeks and, busy in that. But as you can tell, I am blessed as chairman of the Western Caucus to have a lot of capable colleagues that can fill in at a moment's notice. I want to thank Kathy Morris-Rogers, who was chairing, Mr. LaMalfa, certainly Mr. Holter, Mr. Bentz, and Mr. Barrett as well. And thanks to you guys. Ryan, good to see you.
Yeah.
But thanks to all of you for really helping to localize what is a very regional issue in some areas, but certainly a national issue as well. It really does, it's perplexing to me why we have to spend so much energy defending some of the most important pieces of infrastructure that we have, and that took generations to develop and build, and we've benefited from for so long. In fact, so long that many people forget what life was like without the dams that provide us our way of life. And so, you know, you guys are experts at this. You know the transportation benefits. You know the agriculture benefits. Certainly the clean power that's generated by the hydroelectric dams. It seems to me that we should be spending our resources, our time, and our energy on even improving how, what I keep saying, dams and fish can coexist. And that seems to be the question that is being raised all the time as to why the dams are the answer, the recent breaching of the dams are the answer. If we spent more energy doing that, we could continue to benefit from these dams for a long time to come. Otherwise, gosh, we've got to spend all our waking moments defending instead of benefiting from them and increasing our benefit from them around the country. There's so much opportunity in other parts of the country that we could be realizing that we're not, and that's a shame. It really is. If we're trying to move forward with a carbon-free future, there's hardly any better solution than hydropower. And like Russ was just talking about, the best battery mankind has ever developed is the pressure of the water behind a dam. It's simple. It follows the laws of physics every single time. We can count on it. And so I just want to express my appreciation, not only to the members of Congress, but particularly to the witnesses here who shed so much light on the benefits and the issues that we face, and helping provide solutions on how we can move forward into the future. And so thank you for that. And I don't have a particular question. I think you probably answered all of them, and I appreciate that very much. Thank you all for being here and helping move this discussion forward in a very positive way. Thank you, Mr. Fulcher.
Thank you.